Good afternoon. Thanks for everyone for being here. I'm Jay Griffin, Chair of the Commission, joined virtually here by Commissioner Jennifer Potter, Commissioner Leo Suncian. The purpose of today's status conference for the Commission to receive responses to the specific questions posed to Hawaiian Electric as described on the agenda filed in the docket late last week, as well as to ask Hawaiian Electric follow-up questions, provide the participating parties an opportunity to ask follow-up questions on the same material. And again, everyone, our focus here is the scheduled dispatch program implementation plan. I do want to thank everyone for your incredible responsiveness with this, flexibility and feedback. So we've gone a little over 3 months time from concept to where we stand today. So I want to thank everyone for your work on that as we look to finalize these details and then let the real work start. So again, I just want to acknowledge what a step forward I think that is, and as far as time frame to bring things from concept to reality. So as far as format, I want to briefly just note that Commission's hosting the status conference through their WebEx for docket parties and presenters, but is also live streaming this for the public and stakeholders via our website. And the link will be, sorry, I got distracted here. We're live streaming the status conference for public and stakeholders via YouTube link provided on our website. And with this link, the public and stakeholders will be able to view the status conference, but not able to provide comments during our meeting this afternoon. Commission's recording this, and the recording will be available on our YouTube channel. Per the conference notice filed in the docket late last week, we'll facilitate a discussion where we invite Hawaiian Electric to respond to various questions posed in the notice, and opportunity for questions from the DER parties, consumer advocate, commission staff, and commissioners. And so with this, I'm going to turn it over to Rachel James, our staff attorney at the commission, the lead on this docket, and she's going to facilitate the discussion. So please take it away, Rachel. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you, Chair Griffin. Again, thank you everyone for your longstanding efforts, your concentration and time, and just really innovative ideas and dedication to this docket. I'd like to begin this, as Chair Griffin mentioned, starting with an opportunity for HECO to respond to the SDP questions that were posed in the notice last week. So if I could ask the person from Hawaiian Electric who will be providing that update, you're welcome to begin. And if that person has slides, if you could let us know, we work with Pete to get you their screen.
Hi, Rachel, Chair, Commissioner Potter, Commissioner Suncian, DER parties, consumer advocate, staff. Nice to see you all. Thank you for the opportunity. It's going to be Yo and myself going through the questions. We don't have slides, so pardon the informality. We were planning on just kind of punching through each one. We are definitely happy to take questions at any point. So I will start off. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to question 1. And this is where we are being asked to provide more information regarding what a new DER customer can expect if they indicate a desire to participate in SDP between July 1st, 2021 and August 1st, 2021. And as more kind of background to this question, what we had proposed in our implementation plan is that we start the program up on July 1st. So the tariffs will be effective on July 1st. And we're going to be busily doing robust outreach to the contractor industry and to our customers, doing internal training to groups like our call center who are going to be taking calls from customers on the new program. So definitely, not sitting around for a month, but working really hard, focused mainly on outreach and getting the right kind of educational materials out there to, our website and do press releases, social media blasts, all of that to make sure that everybody is aware of the new program and knows what the process is going to look like. And then officially start accepting applications on August 1st. That said, we aren't going to be stopping new applications within that July timeframe. So part of our process is that for new DER customers who want to sign up for this new program, they would actually go through our normal CIT process because we do need them to have an underlying interconnection agreement. So through July, customers could sign up through CIT, and as a part of that review, they can also be eligible for the scheduled dispatch program. So our distribution planners will be kind of looking at the system as a whole and how it's going to operate as a part of EDP. But as kind of separate records keeping, at this point, we're asking that customer to go through the normal process because that's already built into CIT. And then at the end of that, we would ask them to do an amendment form with us that just kind of officially captures their enrollment in EDP. And that just makes it easier for us to track and report kind of on the side. So that's what it would look like. Are there any questions? Or Rachel, I don't know if you want us to kind of go through everything and then open it up for discussion. I defer to the commission, whatever
If you could,
your
please.
preference.
Yes, Lonnie, thank you for asking. If you could do a run through, and then we'll have time for questions following.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
I'm gonna hop back to question number 2. So question 2 is asking us to respond to the DER party's suggestion to allow any battery installed up to 90 days prior to the Commission's June 8th, 2021 order to be eligible to opt into the scheduled dispatch program. And this is something that actually came up with the DER parties when we were meeting with them before we filed the implementation plan. We had not thought of this at all. So when it came up in our meeting, I think Yo and I and the team were kind of surprised at the idea. We're not totally adverse to it. We do have some comments, though, associated with this idea. And the first one I think we voiced when we were meeting with the parties, we said, well, doesn't this kind of go against the intent of having new batteries, you know, incented with this kind of like one-time payment? And these customers had already signed up, you know, obviously been incented to, you know, purchase the battery. So isn't that kind of strange that we're now going back? So, you know, if they do want to take the incentive, we would ask that they change the operation of their system so that, of course, it complies with the scheduled dispatch requirements, and we would need to review that system again under the new operation of the system. One other thing that came to mind for us is that it might cause some execution risk for us. As you know, you all are aware, this is a pretty short time for us to implement a new program, and so we would prefer to, of course, take the Commission's order and, you know, just knock it out, kind of the basics, right? Make sure we follow through and launch this program and get it done on time. So any kind of extra fancier type of administrative requirements that we have, I think would be harder for us to implement and implement successfully. Yeah, I think I'll stop there. Okay, I'm gonna go to question 3.
Hi, Lonnie. If you don't mind, I have 5-second thoughts on top of that. Sorry, folks, I have to flash in and out because we had a big order in a non-PEC case just come down. But yeah, I think the understanding here was that if customers that proceeded however long, whatever date you want to go back to, signed up for this program, they would commit to all those requirements in terms of scheduling their battery and whatnot. So, you know, that is the deal that is expressed in this situation. And I think, you know, therefore, if they're willing to sign up, then, you know, they should be able to sign up and then get the compensation as well. So I think we're on the same page in terms of that would be the requirement if any parties who already installed wanted to then sign up to this program. Thanks.
Thanks for clarifying, Isaac. Okay, I'm going to move through to the third question that I'm going to take regarding enrollment. We are asked to respond to the DER party's proposals to have the kind of big date here be the building permit application plus installation deadline. And so we were, that was actually our original proposal when we were talking things through with the parties. We wanted to have the installation date as the first time we call, enrollment is starting, since the customer is really ready to commence operations as of that date. But in one of our meetings, we had heard from the DER parties that they wanted to move that up for valid reason. They said, look, that might come pretty late in the customer's process if building permits are delayed and so forth, and the customer might not know exactly what incentive they're going to get, whether it's going to be the first tier or the middle tier or the last tier. So we thought that was reasonable. So we thought as a compromise to move that up to the date of approval of the customer's amendment form. But it sounds like the DER parties, after consideration, want to move it back a little bit. So we are fine with that. That was our original proposal all along. It makes sense to us. And we think it also aligns pretty well with basing the enrollment date based on a time or a date as opposed to megawatt capacity. And so basing it on a set date is something that we can support, and that we'll explain a little bit more later on. Okay, I'm going to jump back to questions.
Real quick, I think we come to agreement on this. I think Robert just wants to clarify about what you had indicated about the DER party's previous position.
Yes, thanks, Lonnie. I appreciate the discourse. I think the original proposal by Hawaiian Electric was to set compensation based on the date of installation, but would still be a tier. That's problematic in that if a customer's already gone all the way to the point of installation, installed, and they don't know what incentive they're going to get, that's challenging, particularly if they've already signed a contract and already committed, got to that stage. And so I think our proposal, or what we submitted to the commission, is a little bit more nuanced in that we're basically proposing to get away from the tiers of how many applicants are coming in or how many systems are installed, but more of just setting it by date. I can clarify this more. Hopefully what we submitted was clear, but if it wasn't clear enough, happy to try to elaborate more. So again, two proposals: either it would be based on the time of application plus some proof of a reasonable intent to install, or it would have to be a different approach, which would be based on looking at the system needs and looking at when you're installed, if you're meeting those needs, unless set by 15 megawatt tier categories. Said that pretty quickly, but hopefully that made sense.
Thank you, Rob. I just want to take a moment to reiterate that our hope is that we can allow HECO to respond to all of the inquiries. And if you could note your clarifying comments, and then we'll have time for that. We just want to make sure we at least get through all of the items on the list, and then have time for discussion on points that need clarification at the end. Just a reminder. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thanks, Rachel. Okay, I'm going to hop back to questions. And the next one is, please indicate whether all SCB customers can proceed through the Quick Connect process, and if not, why not? So for Quick Connect, we are still looking at Quick Connect as a pilot. And so we have told everybody, the stakeholders, hey, if it goes well, then we would be open to expanding Quick Connect circuits at the end of the pilot, but we are only halfway through it. So we would like to stay consistent with the circuits that we have identified to be open to Quick Connect customers. That said, I was reminded that we already kind of have a Quick Connect process that we built into our scheduled dispatch program. So as long as the system is not going to export more than 5 kW at night, then we're giving it kind of like an immediate approval, which, you know, is great, I think, for customers. So that was something that we tried to look at in order to make the process as quick as possible for customers. And I think, Yo, that I'm going to start handing off to you because the questions get more into operational areas. Yep. And costs. I think you're next, Yo.
Thank you, Lonnie. Aloha, everyone. Moving forward, program costs. For the proposal, the question is the $34 million that we requested, does that include the costs of DRMS, CIT, and SAP updates? The answer to that question is no, it does not. And if not, what are the costs and how is HECO planning to cover them? So with the time frame of 10 days, we were not able to get all the necessary cost information for CIT, SAP, and DRMS. So we did not see cost recovery in our ask. We wanted to ensure that we can meet the implementation filing deadline of the 18th. So we included the incentives that we knew based on the commission order of the tiered payment structure. With that said, if the commission would allow us, when we know the actual costs and incur them, we would submit the 3 items specific to the EDR update for cost recovery consideration, as Commission alluded to, program cost recovery in the initial order in the implementation plan. So that is our current position, that we would file something after the fact. For incentive payment and verification timeline, those are the next headline. For us to comment on the suggested approach regarding to basically looking at the timing of the payment, basically, I think it was the comment of required specification whereafter be adopted. If not, what improvements can be made to adjust the concerns the parties have identified. So the idea is after the installation is made, when does the customer actually get paid? We actually go through a verification process that has 30 days here, 30 days here, and up to 90 days to verify the total equipment performance. So we understand that that may be a long process. Our positioning was that when the DER parties provide us a screenshot that says this system is committed to deliver the 2-hour system, that's the committed contract amount that we would verify, that we would receive, but we wanted to actually verify that it is actually providing that information. And we felt like that was critical before we provide the payment. We felt that that was essential, as we didn't want to pay quickly and then result in a clawback through a penalty because we didn't go through the verification process accordingly. So we felt like doing a proper verification, a thorough verification early on was the right thing before we made any sort of a payment structure for this. And earlier there was a mention about the 90-day retrospective. This was part of the discussion about the verification, which is a challenge. If a customer intended to already buy a battery program, a battery system, and they're going to recommit that to be part of the SDP, should that payment incentive be for the whole battery or the committed amount of the portion that is exported? That has been a difficult discussion because we don't know what that person's load is going to be at any given time. So that has been a hot topic that we don't have a clear answer. Hence, this verification timeline would have been a back and forth with the DER parties. Moving forward, operational requirement, the 2 megawatt per minute. Making sure I didn't skip anything. Okay, 2 megawatt per minute. Please discuss how this ramping up could be implemented, and the resources are expected to behave during the scheduled dispatch. So each of the resource will dispatch for 2 hours. That is going to be the case. The 2 megawatt per minute, if we have a 50 megawatt resource, and if in a hypothetically like a very synchronized clock where every single 50 megawatt, 10,000 batteries were to dispatch identically at the exact same moment at 6 p.m. 00 second and then shuts off at 8 p.m. 00 second, that's actually quite dangerous for the system. So we we sought out the system operations guidance. 2 megawatt per minute came about. So how do we implement this? We discuss with the DER parties on different options. One option that we're getting closer to is 25 blocks of 2 megawatt blocks each, where the first block would dispatch at 6 p.m., the next block at 6:01, 6:02, 6:03, all the way to 6:24 to fully dispatch to 50 megawatts. And then each of the blocks would then go 2 hours from there. So I think there's a question later on, but the 6 to 8 block is a general sense of that system operators have provided us. And the idea is for us to deliver a proper ramping from 6 p.m. to 8:24 to be exact. We are currently in discussion with the DER parties. Some inverters outright, they already told us that this is possible, and some wanted, the association side wanted to check with the other solar contract to see if this was possible to have that minute-to-minute type of accuracy. So that is why our implementation plan mentioned that we are working with the DER parties on this ramping implementation. Second point of the operational requirements, please identify the necessity of the battery size requirement suggested, which is at least twice the size of the newly installed PV, and respond to the DER parties' suggested removal of the requirements as identified in DER parties' comments. So similar to as what Lonnie was discussing, this was, we've gone through a couple iterations, and I think when we are done discussing our answers, we're happy to further openly discuss this with DER parties. But our intent was, when this Bring Your Own Device evolving into emergency demand response program was, there's plenty DER resources that are out there. If we can put a battery on it and move that generation towards to the peak, we can resolve a lot of things. So let's put a battery on. Okay, let's do that. Well, in order to get the benefit of the tax credit, we need to add a little bit of a solar panels. And maybe I misunderstood, but I thought the idea was the addition of the generation was really about tax credits and to be able to be qualified for the tax credit, and that it did not play a role in charging the battery because it was connecting to the existing DER systems, and then the battery would then perform for the 6 to 8 p.m. Per further discussion more recently, we're finding out that these systems may be independent from the existing systems, that it's their own system away from it, and therefore that's why the ER parties wanted to remove this requirement of two times, at least the battery being larger than the PV panels. So later on, we would like to discuss more of if we misunderstood that the intent was really for the tax credit, and if we missed the language about this needing to be an independent system and that this cannot be incorporated into an existing, say, a NEM system or whatnot. So we would appreciate some assistance there. Dispatch period, tariff language. Let's see. So if HECO needs to revise the dispatch period, can it provide a time frame within which customer will be notified of this change? So this ability to change the dispatch period came from the commission. We appreciated that flexibility. Our intent is really not to change this. Once we set it, we really want to leave it and not to change it. So if we do need to change it, we would suggest giving the customers at least 60 days to make that change. The second question is harder. How does Hawaiian Electric suggest that these changes will be promulgated for enrolled customers? Internally, when we discussed it, this could end up being very similar to the advanced inverter update situation, where some that has over-the-air connectivity, they can do it easily. Some that may have to do truck rolls would have to do it through truck rolls. So while the requirement is there, the hope is to not change the requirement. Is really my, at least my personal level, my honest answer, as we see how difficult updating advanced inverter could be. So as we focus in on the remote dispatch controllability, perhaps that may be the opportunity, the best time to actually receive the connectivity to the individual point where over-the-air changes to these requirements are more readily available. So we will keep the requirements per commission guidance, but in terms of the second one, again, repeating myself, I think it will be difficult, to Commission's questions point, to actually dispatch these kind of changes without going through some hurdles. And ultimately, if we made it a contractual, when they sign the participant service agreement, if Hawaiian Electric tells you to do it, you need to do it. And if we leave it in the customer side, we know that's going to be a challenge. So we would seek some guidance from the ER parties, what they think about how easy or hard this may be. Export restrictions. One of the conditions for immediate approval of a system is that export during the hours of 9 to 5 p.m. will remain unchanged. Please clarify if by unchanged, Hawaiian Electric means that export during this time should not increase. If so, please justify the necessity of this condition. So for us, again, we were trying to deliver the Commission order of emergency DR program to reduce the peak by 50 megawatts, and we wanted to do that quickly. And some of these circuits that potentially might be saturated already, even adding a little bit of export during the daytime may result in a challenge, an issue. So we wanted to provide a workflow that shows that these pathways will result in immediate approval. But any type of other export during the day, we would request, and we will do our due diligence to make it as quickly as possible, but we do want to check to make sure the circuit can handle that additional export that is being added to this program. And again, by having an earlier requirement like the battery needs to be twice the size of the PV panels, we're hoping that the additional generation was not that significant, was really our hope, as this is not a DER program like NEM Plus or CGIS Plus. This is a DR program that is intended to do peak reduction. So we really wanted to limit that generation type of a review. But again, we knew it's there, so our workflow does capture, and the distribution plan team has helped us define the various pathway to get that right approval for scheduled dispatch program. Let's see, time frame of dispatch. Please justify the 6 to 8 dispatch time frame. So we worked with the system operations. The peak time is 5 to 9, and we provided the 50 megawatts and discussed what the ramping should be, and we asked them what is the ideal location for this type of resource to be dispatched every single day that is not controllable at this time. The system operators provided their suggestion that 6 to 8 is the best time to be. Now, of course, there's a ramping that happens, right? So at 6 o'clock exactly, it's not the entire 50 megawatt, and then this 6 to 8 is just sort of a general window. It actually ends around 8:24 p.m. for a 2-hour total scheduled dispatch. Okay, let's see. Lonnie, were you taking customer payment, or was I covering that?
I think that was you, Yo.
Okay, customer payment. So the language customer participant system owner in used in a way that makes it clear. Hawaiian Electric, please clarify to whom installer, contractor, system owner, customer, other can HECO provide the incentive payment for enrollment in scheduled dispatch program. Per Commission order, the language was customer and DER system owner was the phrase. So we, in our tariff, we mentioned the system owner as the quantifiable person or entity that can receive the incentive. So it's not limited to the residential or commercial customer, but anyone that actually lends their system can qualify for this. We did not use the word solar contractor or installer because typically this tariff is meant for customers, and we wanted to not create too much confusion, so we stayed with the language system owner. Apologies for creating that extra confusion. That was not the intent. Second point, please clarify in the event of termination, who is responsible for ensuring return of the prorated incentive and how would it be billed and collected? So for this one, we believe the individual or the entity that received the incentive to pay back the prorated amount upon termination of the contract, and hence we consistently use the word system owner throughout for the payment for the incentive as well as for the penalty clause as well as the termination proration. They're all system owners that will be responsible for it. The billing aspect for existing customers will be through the bills. So there can be a payment plan set up for that where we have a 1-year exemption and to be able to collect that accordingly. Or they can pay upfront. That's however way the customer would like to pay that amount. For the system owner, they are not an SAP customer, so we would have to create a separate workflow pathway for the DER system owner that are more vendors to come up with a vendor relationship. So if there is such penalty clause or termination that we need to claw back, we would need to work through a separate mechanism that is not the typical SAP methodology. Let's see. Please discuss alternatives considered for methods of incentive payment issuance, why the proposed approach was selected. Commission, honestly, I may have taken the word one-time incentive literally, but when I hear that word, I would assume the customer expect that check to be a full amount at the get-go. So that we didn't really put in a whole lot of thought process to that. With that said, something like the FastDR TATI does have multiple payment structure where you get paid for the audit first and then 50% at a certain point and then full payment at the verification. So there is precedence for percentage payment, but that is also with a technical coordinator, not directly with the customer. So again, we didn't really think through too many options of how we would pay the incentives structure-wise. So if there are, through our open discussion after this, if there are other ways that we should be considering, we are very much open to how we can balance the payment, as it is a significant amount of dollars. Relatedly, what interest rate type will be charged for the payment plans that exceed the 1-year exemption, and will this interest rate change based on the length of the payment plan? So we asked our financial team about how this should work. The response that we received was, apologies, I have to look it up so I don't mess up the name for it, a non-commodity charge that we currently have under Rule 8, Section D.2. The monthly interest rate is 0.83%. It's synonymous to a late payment charge. We believe this will be the right type of interest and right type of venue to collect such interest for non-payment past the 1-year exemption is what we have. Okay, and then last one is program over under enrollment. Lonnie.
Yep, I'll take that one. So this question relates to a statement we put in our implementation plan regarding variances. We said that they would be trued up at closing of the SDP enrollment phase by slightly under enrolling or over enrolling the final 20 megawatts to stay within the approved program budget. So the first question is asking for our input on the DER party's suggested approach to use a date certain to get the tiered incentive. And so as we discussed earlier, we actually think that's a good idea. We can support that. We think that'll work better towards getting systems operational. The trade-off is that it might be sort of harder to manage from a budgetary standpoint, like we could potentially exceed the 34 million if we get a big rush to, by September 1st, 2022. The last question here is asking to provide the scale of the expected enrollment variance in KW based on our experience with program enrollment in tranches. And we think here it'll be pretty minimal, like to the decimal point type of size. But the point is, that we don't want to reject customers if they're going to put us, a kilowatt or two above any type of cap. So we will adjust for that on the back end. And I think those are all the questions. Rachel, happy to turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Lonnie. And thank you everyone again for adhering to this slightly different format for presentation and questions. So I'd like to invite the DER parties to offer comments and or questions at this time from what's been presented.
Hi, folks. Michael from Enphase here. I added a couple of questions to the chat box. I don't want to jump the queue if other folks have already added questions in, but mine are a little long, so I didn't want to have to read them all to you if it's easier to read them there, or I can just recite them verbally, whatever is easiest.
Hi, Michael. I don't think we've met yet. Isaac Moriwaki on behalf of the DER parties here. I haven't had a chance to look at that yet, but let me do that and then try to facilitate, us addressing those.
Super, thank you.
And sorry, Rachel, I did get your email saying that we wanted to go through HECO's answers first. I didn't realize you specifically meant with no commentary or additions or clarification. So I appreciate that. We've gotten through that. And now I think we need to retrace our steps here because I did see some questions arising, at least on my part, I'm sure on everyone else's, as we went through all the HECO responses. I don't know how we want to step through this. If we just maybe popcorn it, I'm sure Robert has some, initial follow-ups.
Thanks, Isaac. I'll take that as an invitation. Very quickly, I guess just to clarify first with maybe Lonnie, again, I think our proposal was that the tiers would be open till specific date certain, again, to avoid the situation where a customer installs, say, in August, and that tier is, suddenly full. And so the incentive they thought they were getting is no longer available. And so again, I think the idea was to create date certain. Is that something Hawaiian Electric is agreeable to? Again, I think it would require commission input plainly to go that direction, but just want to see if Hawaiian Electric is okay with that concept.
Yes, we are, Robert. We support that.
Okay. Thank you. I guess the other two, just the other quick comments on Quick Connect. Again, I think the industry is more largely gearing up to use Quick Connect consistently for all new installations, since that process is being operationalized. And the concern would be if this is treated differently, where you have to submit an application. Right now, building permits aren't being looked at, and over-the-counter building permits aren't being looked at for at least a month before they can be reviewed. So on average, it's a 3 to 4 month process likely. Adding in an extra month or so for Hawaiian Electric to do an interconnection review, we're tacking on a fair amount of time, plus any needed back and forth for customers to sign applications or fill out amendments, etc. Again, the Quick Connect was viewed as an opportunity maybe to drop at least a month from the process and try to get things installed quicker. And again, flexible if there's things that can be done to alleviate circuit concerns, such as ensuring volt watts activated. But having two different processes, Quick Connect for new customers, but not Quick Connect for essentially these programs, which are intended to be fast, is challenging. The 5 kW battery, which I think essentially you're flagging, which any customer only installs a battery, it doesn't change the amount they export during the day. Again, I'm not sure what the uptake is going to be of that. And I'd be concerned if that's the only thing we focus on, is trying to limit the amount of the battery capacity that comes on. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. You touched on some of the flags that I saw. Can we get clarification from HECO? I think this was your response with regard to Quick Connect. I heard that it's a pilot. You're still looking at it. And then, was there any concrete commitments we could get from HECO on quick interconnection, whether Quick Connect or otherwise, with regards to this particular program? I wasn't totally solid on that. Do we have clarity on that?
Hi, Isaac. I can take that, and others from the Hawaiian Electric team can chime in if I don't give a full and complete answer. But yeah, what I said earlier was that it is a pilot for this year. And I think when we've talked about it with you all along, we said it's a pilot, and if it goes well, we're willing to open it up even more in second stages. And so we still stand by that. I think we're only halfway through the pilot, and it hasn't had huge uptake so far. So Robert, makes me happy to hear that what you just reported, that we should be seeing more adoption of it. We would like to see that. We do want to learn from it. And so as we go, I think we're going to be evaluating, and at the end of the day, we'll be ready to do something more with it, we hope. But for right now, I mean, we still want to have an efficient, streamlined process for these new customers in the scheduled dispatch program. So we are open to, getting more feedback from all of you on how we can make the process as streamlined and as quick as possible. We definitely want to do that from a customer's experience perspective, and also because we know that these systems need to get in on kind of an urgent time frame. So we're happy to take your feedback. We're also struggling a bit just because we have to launch this program so quickly. And so we're trying to kind of work under those pressures, but also make sure that we're taking the steps necessary to make sure it's a successful launch once we do it.
Okay, so from what I heard, then you're still working it out as far as this program, and concretely, how are we going to facilitate the interconnection? If I recall, I think the PC ordered that to be a 30-day interconnection requirement, right? So I guess that's where we're starting out here. Yeah. So
Correct.
do we foresee any issues around that, or like, I mean, that's how it's going to be, I guess.
That's how we see it. That's
Okay.
in the commission order, so we will stand by that.
And as far as feedback goes, yeah, I mean, let us know what kind of feedback you want. I mean, I think the feedback generally is, quicker the better, and Quick Connect is one vehicle that you folks have stood up to achieve that. And if we can use that, then that's great. If not, then what else is there? But if there's any additional feedback you need to process that, let us know, let us know.
We'll do. I appreciate the offer, and we still, are trying to figure out all of the details too for what this process is going to look like. So as we continue our digging, if we come across areas where we think we could really use your insight, from the industry, then we'll be sure to reach out over the next couple of weeks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
With regards to the other flag that Robert raised, I believe it had to do with the battery size requirement. And then, you're also mentioning considerations about the tax credit, and also whether the new installation would be independent from the existing, presumably NEM system. I wasn't clear where you're necessarily going with that, but nonetheless, you concluded by saying that you wanted to essentially kick it back to us in terms of where the DER parties are at. And so I'm not sure if we do it now or whatever, but it seems to me that that's still an open issue, and I don't know how we close that loop.
I guess the question would be, thank you, Isaac. The question would be, when this battery is added with additional solar, can it be connected with the existing DER system so that the renewable generated from the existing system can charge the battery, and you're not relying on that additional panel to do the whole work to charge that battery? I guess that's the question.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure the industry can answer that question on behalf of all designs. I mean, obviously, there's many different products. So in some situations,
it differs from technology to technology. Some inverters only utilize PV power to charge batteries. Others can utilize AC power from an existing system and use that to charge the batteries. Some inverters can do both at the same time. So it's different from technology to technology. And I think it's the responsibility of the homeowner to see how much renewables he uses to charge his battery to qualify for the tax credit for the battery. It's in his best interest to use all renewables, otherwise he will not qualify for 100% of the credit.
Yeah, and this is Chris DeBone. A couple more comments on that. I think the goal to have a successful program is to get as many participants as possible, a wide range of participants. And some customers may not need more PV, but they just do want to get a battery and participate in this program. And that would be a AC coupled battery that can charge from existing, so we can capture those. And some customers will need to or want to add as an incentive more PV up to the 5 kW and anywhere in between. And depending on the type of technology, there will be solutions for all of them. So we do want to make sure that we can get it with just a battery for existing customers using on-site existing DG that is exporting, and all the way to the opposite end to capture as many participants as possible is adding the full capacity of new, excuse me, new generation. And tax credits, to Yo's point, right? If you add some new generation to the battery installation, it is then, it helps incentivize this program.
HECO, Yo, the help give you the answer the questions you had?
The ultimate, it depends, right? What depends on the contractors, depends on the design, and looks like our intent of limiting the PV size of the battery is a challenge, but making it unlimited also worries me. So is there a number that the DER parties would be comfortable so that we can at least have some quantifiable cap so that we can proceed accordingly, so we're not abusing this? I guess what I really want, personally, what I really would like to see is that this is a SDP, peak reduction, demand response oriented program, and not a loophole to increase NEM by 50 megawatts for the customer that wants to do it, you know. And I struggle with having some kind of a limitation. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so sorry, I think the Commission's order specifically has a 5 kW limit on the additional capacity that can be added to an existing system. So, I mean, there is a constraint there about how much additional PV can come on.
There is, yeah. But then if you put in, what, 5 kWh battery, then what happens, I guess, is the question, right? The battery would need to be large enough to deliver the 2 hour in some form factor.
Yeah, so again, I think the primary question from Hawaiian Electric's perspective should be is ensuring that that battery is reasonably charged in order to be able to deliver the service that it's committed to do at night. And that should seem to be the primary focus, whereas I think the focus seems to be more on trying to restrain generation being exported during the middle of the day. The 5 kW does create a constraint. Customers can't add more than that. And then they have to be able to demonstrate reasonably that they're able to charge the battery they're committing into the program.
And the battery capacity has to be big enough to last for 2 hours.
So yeah, this is one of those issues that DR parties, I just don't think we understand the purpose of HECO's proposed limit, and it seems to cut against sort of the policy that the PUC is making clear just across the board about daytime exports. And so I don't know where we stand on this particular issue as between the parties, but maybe the PUC needs to reiterate where it's coming from and how we resolve this particular issue, because it just seems this proposed limit on HECO's part is not particularly productive and kind of coming in from the side. Or so we could bookmark this particular thing for now.
Okay.
I did want to address some of questions from Michael from Enphase, but then we haven't gone through the entire list or whatever. I don't know if others from the DR parties wanted to respond to some of these other responses.
Hey, this is Rocky. Yeah, one area that, and we mentioned this in our recommendation letter, is the operational review period versus the proposal for sending a screenshot that the settings are set in the right manner. And I think that we sort of see the 30-day operational review period with the sort of customer obligation to provide all that data as potentially sort of burdensome. And so just wanted to open that up and hear a little bit more potentially for why that operational review period is seen as necessary by HECO. Hawaiian Electric.
So we don't know what we don't know. I'm going to start with that. But we need to deliver the system and to the commission a 50 megawatt program. And because this is utilizing both load and export, it's going to take some understanding of the numbers. And we wanted to make sure we do our due diligence before we pay ratepayer money to someone for their battery, that it is performing what it was supposed to do. And as I mentioned earlier, we are open to how we can confidently verify that it is doing what it's supposed to do, so that we are delivering the 50 megawatts. And again, at our, I forget when we met, but when we met, we had that philosophical difference of, if a customer was already going to, let's just even select the customers that already purchased their battery and already have started reaping the benefit of making their investment, and they commit to this program with the 5 kW battery, if their load during the peak is now near zero because they're load following, and they've participated in this STP, and now they're exporting too, we would want to say, from any type of demand response 10-day baseline type of analysis, we would say that performance, that committed capability is not the entire 5 kW, but it's just that too that is exporting. That's the differential that got created from the previous owner, previous signees that's coming up. So this verification process would allow us to make sure we are able to report back to the commission. We are confident we can see that 50 megawatts. We are confident that it is dispatching at 6:02 p.m., 6:03 p.m. Is it going to take 30 days? Honestly, I don't know. We're trying to figure that out. Hopefully it's shorter, but the data is important for us to verify.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
I think we agree that, given, the, ratepayer resources are being expended here, it's very important to be sure we're spending them prudently and wisely. And so we do agree that there should be some form of ability to audit. It's that upfront sort of enrollment hurdle that we're seeing some issues with.
I mean,
but thanks for the clarity.
It's hard to it's hard to create a win-win-win situation when it requires a lot of money, right? So a customer commits to this. They start seeing what they need to do with their battery every single day, receives that $4,000, and then we run an audit 3 months in, and we start charging them $100 per month as if we're recuperating that $4,000 until something is resolved. That was the customer. That's not a really happy experience that we're looking for. So a little bit of a waiting game to get that, and sort of the leave it, forget it kind of mindset where we won't bother them because we know the water heater is working. We run the audit, still good to go. No penalty gets triggered. We thought that might be a better customer experience, but we're open to what you guys know the customers very well too. So Would they
So-
not
so
get
really-
angry
and
if they get charged?
So really
Yeah.
And
quickly
that's
on
why
that, what's the specific concern on HECO's part that, the customer sent in a screenshot that the inverter wouldn't be operating as the screenshot indicates, like the technology would somehow fail? Is that the concern? Is it that, the screenshot somehow is not truthful, or what verification over what period of time do you feel like you need?
Yeah. Isaac, again, we don't know what we don't know, right? It could be all of the above, right? We don't want to be accusatory that we're not expecting someone to be untruthful about certain things, but a screenshot is a screenshot, right? So we take that at face value literally and not know that something actually is being delivered every single day.
Right.
How do we gain that confidence?
Okay, so the issue here is valid. The issue here is validation, and then ultimately the timing of the payment. I believe the DR parties have made their position clear in our letter, and maybe HECO disagrees at this point. But yeah, I guess we can flag that as maybe a point of divergence.
Also, nobody has said the F word. 40 days of rain.
I don't know
we
what
have
you're
had
talking
it.
about.
I don't expect to have 40 days again, but it should be reasonable expectation from the customer to size the system for an average day in the area he lives in to produce enough PV power to charge the battery enough to come through with a 2-hour commitment.
Yeah, that's Ralph. That's a separate issue. It's not exactly what we're addressing right now.
It is. If it rains a lot
Ralph,
in the first 30 days, then it might be an
understood.
issue.
Yeah. I wanted to touch on Enphase's list here, some of which I think are already made clear in the PUC's decision and how we propose to run this program in the first place, and or addressed by some of the responses HECO gave us here today in this meeting. But really quickly, what kind of resources HECO dedicating for outreach? I'm wondering if we can take that discussion offline, because that's more of a implementation thing. But HECO did indicate that it will be doing some outreach between the July and August timeframe. The DER party's position is that this program should be launched by July 1st, period. That's what the order directed. And so, again, that might be a point of disagreement on that issue. Number two.
It's Bonnie. I'm happy to take the question now. Answer my question. I think it's a good question. Thank you for the question, Michael. We have a lot of different resources that we can use for outreach. Right now, we're planning on doing various things. So the normal stuff we do is like press releases. We'll do trainings for contractors. We'll do a webinar sometimes where we walk through a process or walk through, for example, the CBRE portal, and this is how you enroll and apply. And then we put that on our website so that anybody who wants information after that can go and view that webinar, and that can be a permanent resource. In the past, we put together guidebooks for what the process could look like. Our website will have a host of information. We'll have FAQs up there, like a simple one-pager that contractors can go to and just get, a download on what the program is and what the process is. So lots of different resources. And we'll, of course, be doing a bulk of this work in the July time frame, and then have those resources be available past August 1st, too.
Thanks very much. That's really helpful. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
After initial phase of SDP, will there be additional program payments for ongoing participation in SDP? No, I would say that's pretty clear. The initial payment for SDP covers the 10 years. There might be other layers of grid services and BYOD programs that you can enroll on top of the underlying SDP commitment, but that would be a separate discussion.
Well, so that was my question, right? So the way I read the decision, I may have missed something because you guys have more familiarity with it, I imagine, than I do. But you know, 150-page document, I saw 10-year program, 10-year program commitment. Payment is for the first 2 years of the SDP portion, which again, I got, but my question is,
payment is for 2 years and then 8 years of a BYOD program commitment to be determined.
Right, I'm with you. I think we're saying a very similar thing, but my question is, for that balance of the 8 years, if the battery is committed to HECO to perform a service as part of the BYOD program, will there be compensation for that additional service that's being provided in years 3 through 10? Or is the upfront incentive meant to cover the entire 10 years?
It covers the entire 10 years.
Okay.
There might be other layers in the value stacking approach or whatever that you can additionally sign up for, but with regards to the scheduled dispatch commitment and whatever it morphs to for the next 8 years, you're getting the payment for that, the entire package. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, appreciate that. Number 3, intended to be paid directly to customers. Yeah. This question, I believe, was addressed directly in HECO's responses.
I think earlier on. Yeah.
Right.
Cool. Thanks.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to step back a bit and recognize that we are moving forward here. There are a bunch of these issues where HECO's clarified the questions, has agreed, for example, on. Seems like there's agreement among the parties with pivoting to a compensation method based on time of installation rather than the megawatt tranches. So we appreciate that convergence. And then several issues as demonstrated by this continued discussion where maybe we can continue to try to work things out, or maybe we just have a divergence based on where things at right now. So I don't know whether other parties or commission staff or the commissioners, want to take it from here. And I don't know if the DR parties or the consumer advocate, for that matter, have additional questions or flags based on where things are or other things that haven't been addressed yet.
Thanks, Isaac. And thank you to ER parties for your comments and inquiries, and HECO for your responses. I do invite the consumer advocate to pose any questions or provide comments that they have at this time. With an eye toward implementation, I understand there are a number of components that are still undetermined. If the comments and inquiries could be focused in implementation and a quick implementation, that would be ideal. So Reen or Dean, I'm not sure who from your team has inquiries or.
Thanks, Rachel. I think we all separately have questions, but let's try it this way. Reen, do you want to start first?
Sure. Thanks, Dean. Thanks, Rachel. And kind of to Isaac's point, I think we do have some comments on some of the suggestions that have been raised to potentially change the program that kind of, as we read it, was described in the commission's order. And so I'll just start kind of with one of the first features, which was looking at potentially extending the program to customers who have already installed or are in the interconnection or installation process. As we understood it, this program was really trying to look at incentivizing new storage to address the need that was being discussed as part of HNEI's analysis. And to that end, it does concern us if the incentives are being used to address, and I think Lonnie sort of raised this point that HECO was also, Hawaiian Electric was also considering whether it should be going toward systems where people have already made a decision to purchase. And we understand that the systems would be reconfigured to address the scheduled dispatch needs as opposed to load following. But the analysis that was done, I think, was really about looking at the value of new scheduled dispatch systems. And I'm not sure that there is support um, that goes toward the value of converting an existing battery storage system to scheduled dispatch, and kind of whether that lines up with the incentives as folks modeled them to get to this program. And in addition, I guess to the extent that we are considering looking at potentially offering this to folks in the installation or interconnection process, I think it should be understood what that means. So how many megawatts does that represent? And it should be clear that that counts toward the 50 megawatts. And if it's decided that it shouldn't, I think we would want to understand why. And then also what that means for the expected impacts of this program. And then to what was being discussed earlier about a set date. So we do have concerns about basing the incentive payments based on a set date as opposed to the tranches. I think we viewed the Commission's order as trying to really strike a balance between quickly incentivizing additional storage, as well as with sort of balancing program costs. And to that end, we saw the caps as really trying to strike that balance. We recognize that, there is uncertainty about what uptake will be. And to that end, I think we would support having sort of overall check-ins to assess how much capacity is being procured, not just as part of EDR or as part of scheduled dispatch, but also through other means. And, if we're not overall close to the 50, that will kind of cause us, I think, to revisit whether changes need to be made in, this program or in other programs as well. Dean, did you want to add?
Hi, I think, okay, I think this is qualifying as an implementation question. Lonnie mentioned a number of different forums or ways to have outreach. I guess I was wondering, is there a date specific by which the company would need, and I'm going to use the term here, fully baked program, so that it could effectively use those different forums to have that outreach?
That's a good question, Dean, and I think the answer is yes. And it would be great if that fully baked program happened like today, but I don't think we have all the details locked down today, given that we're here discussing some open details. So as soon as possible. And that's an additional reason why, sorry for the noise in the background, everyone. That's another reason why we wanted to have some time to, one, get everything locked down so that we can develop the outreach materials and get those out and do the outreach before we actually intake the applications on August 1st. And Dean, your question reminded me of one other resource that I forgot to mention earlier, and that is that this program can be available to commercial customers as well. So we want to work with our key account managers who work very closely with our commercial customers and have them be trained up on the program and have them have the time to go out and talk to the customers that they care for.
Okay, that's helpful. Although, I guess, is there like on a rough and it has nothing to do with the dog barking, a rough approximation of how much time might be necessary to again, for you folks to take the information from the commission through an order or whatever it might be, and develop materials to have that, the programs for the installers and to have that information made available. I get as soon as possible, but again, I think, just to provide a little context, I think trying to rush out there without clear details may cause some confusion that we'd like to avoid. So, again, is there some approximation of the time that might be needed to kind of get that outreach kind of developed and formatted so that it's ready to go?
We thought that 1 month would be a reasonable amount of time to do that work, Dean. So July 1st to August 1st to get it all done.
Oh, okay. So within the context
I don't know if I'm answering your question.
Well, I'm just trying to. I get that you folks are proposing July 1 to August 1, but given that we are trying to lock down some details, I think we are trying to get this out sooner rather than later. Is there like a minimum period, within which, as if the commission grants certain or identifies and addresses certain things by a date certain, we can expect within 2 weeks, 3 weeks or something, where that outreach can occur, and then the program can open up where customers will know what exactly to expect, rather than having these pukas, so to speak, of not knowing what to expect from the program.
I understand your question now better. Thank you, Dean. I think in our implementation plan, we said if we had to go with an earlier start date, we could do July 19th. But I'm not completely familiar with what the assumptions were behind that date. Are you able to fill that part in?
We assume July 19th based on the implementation plan that we would submit is the way to go, and we can proceed forward. Knowing that this meeting is happening right now, we could still target to trying to answer Dean's question by probably mid-month, July, because there are certain areas I forgot who mentioned it earlier, but there are certain areas that we already know how the program is formatting itself, so we're not waiting for those things. So we have started crafting particular FAQs, particular messagings. It's not perfect, to Dean's point, but July 13, 14, 15 is probably when we can come up with a robust materials that we can provide. And obviously we're going to start providing them to the other parties and CA prior to posting them on our website so that there's iteration or review.
To be clear, I don't think the industry is going to be relying on HECO to provide and produce outreach materials, and that's great that HECO is going to be doing promotion from its own end. But I think the number one priority is to get this program going sooner the better, and not to delay it for a month while we work on promotional materials. The industry is ready to go on this and start signing up customers ASAP.
I appreciate that, Isaac. We're not creating promotional material that solar contractors can then use to pitch this. No, I understand the solar contractors have their own sales pitch. What we want to provide is information that the customer may want to answer and find out themselves. This is not a free battery program. This is, there's commitment that the customer must meet for grid needs purpose, and we need to make sure we can translate the technical discussion into layman's terms so the customer understand what their commitment is, so that they know what they are delivering. That's the type of information we wanted to create, Isaac.
Sorry, if I can continue asking some questions. I think it was Yo that mentioned that right now the $34 million is reflective of just the incentive payments. Is there an approximate time frame by which Hawaiian Electric anticipates being able to identify the estimated costs, back office costs, and everything else that might be associated with this program that it may be seeking recovery from, cost recovery from customers?
We've started discussing, thank you, Dean. We've started discussing with our vendors regarding these new requirements. We started creating requirements documents so they understand what they need to quote, features and whatnot. So hopefully, and we need to do this quickly because we want to get this thing automated as quickly as possible, as Lonnie's team are going to be having to do this manually until then. So we're committed to getting it up and running. So Dean, we're hoping to get all the necessary information by early August so that from there we can start grow with the development of the software that needs to be upgraded so that we're ready by the committed date. I apologize, I can't remember the exact date, but towards the end of the year we'll go live with the automation side, Dean.
Oh, okay, thank you. And that actually raises a different question. To the extent that some of these additional steps are needed for automating the process, assuming that the intent again is to move forward as quickly as possible. Is HECO then planning to do most of these things manually until those features have been done?
It would be manual, yes, sir, Dean. And then when it becomes automated, what Lonnie and I discussed is we absolutely need an overlap time where both options are available until both parties, us as well as the people submitting the application, becomes comfortable with the new tool that's being made available. So there will be at least 2 months, I think we laid out, of an overlap time frame leading into next year, which will be fully automated.
Okay, but then you're saying that you wouldn't maybe get those estimates of the automation until later in August, but then the automation itself.
No, early August.
Oh, sorry, early August, but then that the automation itself wouldn't be in place until sometime in 2022.
No, automation will be later in the year.
Okay.
Last time, we're hoping to accelerate this, Dean, but last time we did NEM Plus with a tool called CIT. It took us about 3 months from development, testing, and putting into production, going through all the necessary checks. So we based it on that, where from 8, 9, 10 months, 8, 9, 10 might be the critical months for us for the development of that CIT tool in parallel SAP and DRMS, so that we're ready for November, December type time frame, Dean.
Okay, thank you. And I guess one last question. If assuming that the commission is inclined to adopt something maybe different than was outlined by the company as it relates to how the incentives would be provided, do you believe that there could be additional steps put in to limit the incentives to give or take $34 million, or do you anticipate that there would be a higher cost that would be recovered from customers?
I actually don't know the answer to that question, Dean. I have to think about that a little bit more.
Okay. I have more questions, but with the understanding that Rachel kind of wants to leave 322 to the rest of the period for the commission, I yield the floor to the commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. And at 3:19 even, I appreciate you self-moderating and giving us that extra minute. So I'd like to invite questions from commission staff, and also just to note that if there are remaining questions or comments that you are wanting the commission to consider, please take the time, if you're able, to file those in the docket so that they can be reviewed. So I know this is not the same as having the dialogue here, but your inputs are still valuable, and to the extent that you're willing to share them, we welcome them. So commission staff, do you have questions?
Thank you. Thanks, Rachel, and everyone. We just have a couple of questions. So first of all, relating to the customers that may wish to enroll who already have a battery within the previous 90 days, does Hawaiian Electric have an estimate of how many megawatts of batteries may be included in that group? So how many megawatts of customers were enrolled within the last 90 days? Or sorry, before the order.
Hi, Grace. I don't have that on hand right now, but we could certainly pull that up. I don't know, did you? Okay.
No, apologies, I don't have that number.
Okay, no problem, thank you. I have a couple of questions related to sort of batteries that may be separate or separate from the system. So if a customer is applying to the SDP program and they're only planning to add a battery, so they're not adding additional PV capacity, would Hawaiian Electric consider then their daytime exports to have changed, given that they'd effectively be moving their generation from midday to the peak period? Is that, and the reason I ask is because we're interested in whether they'd be eligible for the really quick, immediate approval for the SDP program, or whether that may be affected by changed midday exports.
I will ask our distribution planning team to answer more precisely, but that is the intent, to have if the scenario is battery only, that we would want to make this review cycle as quickly as possible. The distribution planning team can, the question is, would it change the generation capacity, I guess through the amendment form, would we change that expectation from that application, or how would you look at the circuit by that change in the generation? How would you capture that?
Okay, yeah, thanks. I think we'd have to think about this one, but essentially, any additional export during the day, we'd want to take a look at that. And, not to say that we take the entire review period. We do understand that this is a expedited process, and so that's why we had that immediate approval sort of step. As far as adding a battery, I think it would be prudent that if that adding a battery would reduce the export during the day, I guess we'd need to understand how we could sort of guarantee those types of export conditions. Yeah, not sure if anyone else wants to add anything.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So going back to sort of the physically separate system, so if there's a physically separate system from, so a customer adding a battery separately, what program would that customer then be in if the battery is installed separately from the existing PV system?
So that's where our discussion was, where the origin of the enrollment into this program is the underlying tariff, regardless of whether the actual system is with or without the existing system. So if they are a NEM customer, this new independent system would still be considered NEM system.
Okay, thank you. And then I just have one more question, I think, which is, I think related to what Reen was talking about a little bit as well, which is, the HNEI has predicted this 5 to 9 p.m. peak. I guess I, not being a system engineer, I'm confused a little bit about why all of the capacity is sort of coming online at 6 and then going through to 8:30ish. Would it not be more prudent to kind of schedule those throughout the 5 to 9 peak period?
I would have to, that's actually a great question. I would have to work with Lonnie system operators and distribution planners on if we have a 15, well, let me rephrase that. The commission ordered us to go get 50 megawatts for a 2-hour window, that we would set the 2-hour window. So we were trying to abide by the commission order that there was a 2-hour window that we needed to create this program for. So if allowed to do that, then we would create ultimately, hypothetically, a 225 megawatt resource from 5 to 7 and 7 to 9 type of situation. The question then I would need to ask is, HNEI's analysis, I would assume, was assuming that we would need 50 megawatt at the peak level to protect us from the potential capacity reserve shortfall, and having 225 megawatt is not, because this is a scheduled dispatch, right? We cannot put it on top of each other all of a sudden. So that, I hope I'm answering your question of, we were focusing on a 2-hour window, I guess is the best way to put it, per commission order and per the HNA analysis, that top number was in that 50, 60 megawatt range. To the others that has better knowledge of the HNEI analysis, please correct me if I assumed incorrectly.
No, that's helpful. Thank you. I think I'm hearing that HECO understood us to say the commission guidance to be that, all of the programs should have the same 2-hour window. Is that correct? Okay, thank you for that. I believe that is all of staff's questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace, and thank you for the responses as well. I'd like to turn the floor over to Commissioners Potter, Commissioners Asuncion, and Chair Griffin for questions and closing comments.
And thank you all for your time today. It was a very It was very educational to listen to the dialogue. I appreciate the DER parties bringing some of these issues to light and for consideration. I actually do not have any questions at this time, but I do appreciate the hard work that HECO has put in and negotiating and working alongside the DER parties to flesh this out in a way that's going to be sustainable. And for HECO really stepping up to the plate here, we're really grateful. Thank you for making this happen.
Leo?
I don't have any questions today. Thanks.
I just want to echo a few things. I do have some questions, but as I said in the beginning, I want to thank everyone here again. In a little over 3 months, we've taken something from concept to almost implementation. And it's a reminder that, right, we're never going to be perfect, especially under this time frame. And so we're going to make the decisions with what we have and then need to move forward when we have to. And my comment to everyone here is we need to move forward now. Let's step back and look at the big picture here. I think we got a good update last week, and I'm going to cross over to other dockets, but in the retirement docket, we got some promising news that with the addition of new programs, including this one and other projects, we have a better reliability picture in both next fall and next summer. But let's also be very clear, none of that is online yet. Actually, none of those projects will be online before September. So we will be relying on what happens here to help close the gap. And so we want to see it move forward expeditiously for that reason. It's one of the many things that we're counting on. And so when we come to these crossroads, we're not shooting for perfect, we're shooting for serving the public. And so keep that in mind as we come across the many different decisions, but we're going to move forward, on the timelines that we've set and work to resolve the questions that we have. And so that's in the spirit that I want to ask here, that we want to move forward. I know Thursday, opening the door on Thursday is scary to a lot of people, but I'm a lot more scared that if come next fall, we don't have enough of these measures in place, we're going to have a much different discussion. So I just want to make sure we're still all on that page, because we have things on paper, but we don't have anything in reality yet. And what is in its place in reality is to move the schedule around of our other generation units, which are not all perfect themselves. And that's something that still gives me a lot of concern. Without other resources online, we will have those units there, but we're still going to burn oil. So that's not good enough. And they're not nearly as reliable as we need to be. So please don't lose sight of these big picture questions as we sort through the details here, and understand the reason for our urgency. There's a reason why the first word in this is emergency. And it still is. Hasn't been resolved yet. This is part of the resolution and actually the first critical linchpin. So I thank everyone for their time and efforts in doing this, but that is why we need to keep pushing forward with resolve. So thanks again. I do want to, on the proposal, so now some more of the specifics. On the DER party's proposal, I think it was option 2, to set, according to a timeline, they'd said the first tier would be up till September. But if we take that up, it seems like we want some date before that so that we actually have everything in place by September. And so at least think about that. Is that a month? How many months do we need prior to September 1st, as the date trigger, so that we have some confidence that all of those resources are online and reducing load by September 1st? Because that's the date, that's the retirement date. So I guess some feedback on that, either from Hawaiian Electric or DER parties.
I think when we indicated Thank you, Chair, for the question. I think when we indicated installation, I think we actually intended validation. So that'd be submission of everything to Hawaiian Electric to indicate that the system is installed and is, again, this is a little bit challenging, depending on when that system can start to operate. So if it's a new system and it's allowed to energize, then it's fully functioning at the time that the validation is submitted into Hawaiian Electric. So it should be everything they need to be able to ensure that the system's operating. And again, I guess maybe we get back into some of these discussions about the review and performance, et cetera, but theoretically at that stage, you can count on the system actually being there.
I guess just to confirm that with one, so it could be, wait, Robert, were you saying it could be close up to basically end of August? Is the final date here?
I think we could be flexible with that, but again, I think yes. I mean, that's essentially what we'd be looking at. Yes.
Okay, and I guess can we confirm that from Hawaiian Electric?
Chair, I understand your question. I'm not sure if I fully understood Robert's answer, where if because Chair, you want the resource available on September 1st, and if we are saying, okay, so this is I'm confused. This is DR party's proposal by timing and not by tier. Therefore, Robert, you're saying that we would pay $850 per kW for anything energized, which was our original proposal, installation timed. So that's sort of aligning. Whenever the August 31st is the installation operational enrollment date, that's the date. And anything else that's preceding that, that's still ongoing, September 1st on, they would receive a different tier. Is that correct, Robert? Did I assume correctly?
Anything that is installed, energized, validation submitted before September 1st, correct, we get 850.
Roger that. Sorry about that, Chair. Yes, we confirm. We agree with Robert's DR party's comments.
Okay, that's helpful. So I think what we're hearing is, based on the terms that you have there, there's sufficient confidence that the system will be energized and operating, in time as we make the transition to take the plant offline.
I think the only flag I'd have here is if we're not allowed to energize at the time of validation. I'm hoping that some of the progress we've made to date, that won't be an issue, and we will all be moving quickly. If there is a need to submit validation and wait permission to operate from the utility, then there's going to be additional time factored in for whatever it takes. I think we can work that out.
And thank you, Robert, for that. Sorry, Chair, if I may, when the enrollment is complete, the approval is there, enrollment is there, the system is allowed to operationalize. We actually need it to be operationalized from that moment on, so that when we do the verification to pay the incentive, that comes later. But the energization would be at the enrollment day.
Okay, well, I'm not sure what else I think I got the answer that we need, but I think I have the understanding that generally the answer here is yes, subject to certain details, particularly the one you're referring to, Robin. If there was if there was some gap between validation and permission to operate. Okay, and really that's a concern if that is a systemic problem, right? We have a whole bunch of systems in the queue, and that there's a delay there. So, but that's helpful. Okay, I wanted to pick up some of the discussion on the interconnection here. And so to go back to my earlier comments, I mean, the whole point here of designing this was to design it in a way that would allow for quick interconnection. And I think through the various means that have been proposed, but kind of as a philosophy, that's the intent here. And so to hear, you know, we have a program to do it, but it's only a pilot, we got to think about it. Like, that's not in line with what we need to have happen here. So for now, I just offer that is, again, think big picture. We're using this as a tool to solve a bigger problem. I understand that with each project, there are items to go through, but you've got to go through the lens of this is something that we need, we're going to be relying on, not something we're trying to discourage. So I guess any other, I mean, as we go to the details, I think we're gonna have to rely on the folks here to work that out, but you've heard the perspective, at least that I have here, that the idea is to, I mean, again, the first word is emergency, and the idea is to interconnect in an expeditious process. And fundamentally, we're in this problem because of interconnection problems. And we're not out of that yet. So that's a big problem if we don't see that mentality here. Is that understood?
There, that's
Okay.
absolutely understood. I can confirm that.
And I take you know, I think my takeaway from the filings that is the intent, but I guess as we work through the details, let's make sure that, you know, what happens in practice is consistent with that. We don't lose the big picture. Okay, and so I did want to touch on a couple of questions Grace asked about. I mean, you had brought up a concern about systems that are interconnected independently. I just wanted to follow up and clarify it. It seems to me that if somebody submits an application if it's clear that it's physically separated, they would have to be signing up under a different program, correct? Not, I mean, they may be an existing NEM customer, but that concern seems to be addressed there. If it's clear that it's physically separated, I mean, there's NEM plus option, but if we're talking about adding PV isolated from the other part of the system, it seems like that would have to happen through a different program. Or am I misunderstanding that?
Sure, it's my lack of experience and knowledge in the DER world where existing system and then NEM plus the interactivity of it with how the DER part is intended to deliver this STP. I'm still learning, Chair. And to your point, if there is a system that is independent, is that a completely different? Should it not be a NEM, and should they add 10 kW or 5 kW of a separate CGS plus? That part I would actually have to work with Lonnie and her team to make sure I can succinctly explain what needs to happen here, as I am not sure, Chair, on whether there should be a new DER application or this 5 kW allowance allow them to stay under the existing DER tariff. And if they stay under the existing 5 kW, I read it so that they stay under the underlying tariff. Therefore, it's independent system, but they added 5 kW to NEM, and therefore they stay NEM. And maybe I oversimplified it, Chair, but that's how I read it.
I guess I put it back out there because I don't want this disconnect or disagreement here to unravel things later. Is there a different view or perspective on this?
So to the Isaac and Robert and others at the DER parties, the 5 kW allowance.
Well, let me say it this way,
Yes,
I mean, when we
yes,
added the 5 kW provision, that was, understand this would be for existing NEM customers. They would install a battery, sign up under the program. There's provision to add, but this was all under the same system. This is a totally physically separate system. Again, you heard what I said. It seems like would be signing up under a different tariff, and now you're talking about as a signing up for this program under one of the other existing tariffs.
So thank you, Chair. I would seek guidance to the DER parties. I understood what the chair said. I too also assumed that the 5 kW was for the existing system, and it was for that example. However, through the discussion, I heard that certain inverters cannot be added in an existing system, and so on. So to the DER parties, when the 5 kW allowance was given, were you guys thinking independent was always a choice, and therefore this is not a new CGS Plus application, but an existing approval? Because if I heard the chair correctly, if the system is independent, it should be not the underlying tariff, but a separate application.
Sorry, I'm going to have to ask a clarifying question now. Yos, or to your clarifying question, just briefly. I mean, again, if you're adding additional generation capacity under a tariff, it doesn't matter how it's operated. It's just going to be considered. So if you have 4 inverters or 2 inverters, that's still just one system under the tariff. And so how it's physically interconnected shouldn't necessarily matter. So I mean, the intent is to expand the 5 kW. How that battery is connected to the PV system may change depending on the technology. Does that answer the question? So again,
I'm not
AC
sure.
batteries. Yeah.
Well, what was clear is, at least prior to this decision, it would have to come under it was either NEM Plus or a different tariff, right?
Correct.
Chris, you were going to ask or offer comment?
Yeah. I think literally the word system doesn't apply. We're really talking about new generation and a battery. And a battery is not generation. It moves generation, it absorbs and injects the generation. So generation is just the PV. So really we're talking about adding new generation under this program onto existing tariffs. So it being part of an existing system or a completely new system, I think we have to look at it from the perspective of the meter. It's adding more generation to that home and a battery to that home. The technology of it being interconnected, it doesn't matter. It's generation and load behind the meter. So this system might be tripping us up. I don't know if that's a good word that we could use. And then there's 2 scenarios here. It's a retrofit on an existing installation or a new installation. When we're talking about CGS Plus and new, it's all the same. Then we have CGS and net metering, and I don't know if CSS makes any sense, but these are obviously retrofits to existing systems. So maybe we should just stay on one of the topics. I think personally, I think this is going to be more popular from an economics and incentive standpoint to a retrofit of existing systems. It just seems like that's what's going to be the more popular. So if we could narrow our scope there and maybe go back onto it, so it's adding a retrofit to an existing tariff with new generation and a battery. From that perspective, some of the questions, I mean, back to Hawaiian Electric, it's an amendment to an existing system. So a new 5 kW of PV onto an existing NEM system will be an amendment of new generation. The new generation is under this program as an amendment to their existing net metering system, but their existing net metering system is left alone as the capacity size. That's kind of how I thought it has been up to this point.
Okay,
Right.
that's helpful clarification. Just wanted to discuss another, I guess, series of comments that I found concerning. It was, you were saying this was a backdoor opening of net metering. But commission knew what we approved this, and we understand that, and it was not a happy decision. But again, we're doing this because of the circumstances, and so that was our call. And so what I'm concerned about is your guys' call in implementing this, substituting for that decision. We said okay for the reasons that we said, and what we need is the cooperation and implementation. That call's been made.
Understood, Chair.
Sorry, that's not your call. That was our call.
It is
And
not our call.
I'm still not happy about it. Not that I disagree with it, but we did it under the certain circumstances here.
Understood. And to Chris's
So
comment
please
about
don't try
retrofit,
to unwind what we did. So when I hear comments like we're concerned about it, that doesn't instill confidence in me that in the myriad of different decisions that come in the course of implementation here, that there'll be effort to slow everything down.
apologies, Chair. That was the decisions made. I understood. The comment was made. My ill-advised comment was made towards why did we put that cap of at least twice the size of the battery for a panel? Why was that needed? We wanted to Chris's point about retrofitting, we are all for that type of mentality, that this is a retrofit and not a new way of getting NEM systems, Chair. And so I apologize for the word choice that I used, and I hear you.
Okay, and so without belaboring that, there seemed to, in looking at the variety of different export restrictions and the reasons, again, it seems to have not incorporated our feedback and other decisions, not understanding the big picture here. It seems like we're moving into a paradigm where we need to encourage exports of all types, daytime and nighttime. We're doing this because we have shortfall or projected shortfalls otherwise. So again, the way that the export restrictions were framed and the reasoning, again, I felt like in reading and hearing the discussion earlier is at odds with the bigger picture here. So is there also understanding, that particularly with some of the various different applications to manage voltage, it's not clear to me why this is a problem. So any feedback on that?
Chair, this is Ken Haramaki from Transmission Distribution Planning. Essentially, what we're concerned about managing is the hosting capacity at the local level, understanding that there's a system, overall system hosting capacity that is available. The checks that are required and are done through the Rule 14H is really to screen, many things. And to ensure that the equipment along the line can handle the export capacity during those times. We are trying to do whatever we can to improve those times, but those checks are still required at the local level.
You heard what I said. Thank you. I had one other question, then commission itself's got to run shortly on the topic of the prior people that are in the queue for the prior 90 days. I guess it would help if we could get an estimate of the numbers there. I just have no sense whether this is a small thing or a big thing. And so if we can get feedback on that quickly, that we can make a call. It seems to me that there does need to be some consideration of what operationally would happen, right? These are either systems that were installed as CGS plus, Smart Export, or self-supply, right? So either one is presumably exporting during the day if it is at all. The other two are exporting if they are exporting in the evening, but it could be any time, right? So the difference is the scheduled part of this. So that, just so I'm clear, is that characterize what we would be looking at as far as adding this option onto those existing tariffs?
We can get that to you, Chair. That should be a fairly easy number to pull. Off the top of my head, about 80% or so of our applications are coming in with a battery, but we'll just have to take a look at what that number is within the 90-day time period, and we'll send it to the Commission.
Okay, that's all I have. I want to thank everyone again. I know, look, it's been hard on everyone. It's been hard on us. But again, we're doing this so that we can smooth the path forward, both in next year, the year ahead, and the years after that. So thanks everyone for your time, effort, and work on this. And then I'm going to turn it over to Rachel to close down. Thanks.
Chair, can I just make one comment? This is Shelley.
Sure.
I just want to clarify, I mean, you mentioned that you don't want us to second guess your decisions, the Commission's decisions. I want to assure you that is not the spirit of what Yo was talking about. We have very pointed discussions within our company that's just to what you said, that you folks have made the decision, we're here to implement what it is, and sometimes we're trying to make sure we're interpreting the order in the way that we think it's intended. And so I'm not exactly sure what the details of the conversation were just now that led to that conclusion, but I want to make sure that that is not what we're doing in our decision making internally. I didn't want you to walk away with that impression.
Okay, acknowledged. And Yo, is not pointed at you. I was partly reacting to what I heard. I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Griffin, and Commissioner Potter and Commissioner Asuncion, and everyone for being here. Again, reiterating the Chair and the Commissioner's comments about our gratitude for your hard work and diligence in this effort, and appreciating the candid input that you've brought before us today. As mentioned, you're welcome to include additional comments in the docket so that they can be reviewed by the Commission, and the Commission will be responsive to those inputs shortly. We'll be responding, again, aiming to respond as agilely as you all have and moving with urgency under the emergency that we're operating under. So thank you all for your time. Have a good afternoon. Aloha.